It's an honor and a pleasure to be with you here and now in the sacred ground of Glastonbury. Glastonbury is, and I think will always be, very closely connected with the face and the message of one of its strongest defending angels, and that is the late, great John Michell, who lived from 1933 to 2009. His writings, his research, and his mystical conviction helped to revive the spirit of Avalon, especially in the 60s and 70s. He played a major role in inspiring the first of the Glastonbury festivals, and through his writings, a generation of seekers to investigate the mysteries of ancient places and forgotten knowledge. It was John's work and personality that infused the first of the Megalithomania conferences, which was in fact named after one of his books. He wrote about 24 books and hundreds of pamphlets, articles, columns, and letters. His main vision had to do with sacred geometry and number. Though he treated many subjects, often very, very subversively, number was his guiding light, and he always returned to it. I remember many, many evenings with John Michell and John Neal, who was his lifelong best friend, debating the subtleties of the number canon into the early hours of the morning. In 1980, John Michell wrote a short but dense and very groundbreaking book called Ancient Metrology, The Dimensions of Stonehenge and of the Whole World as therein symbolized. Taking off from this, John Neal went on to mine the whole motherlode of systems of ancient measure. All these systems have a single unifying factor, and that is relationship, significant relationship with the human body, the dimensions of the earth, the moon, the sun, and the heavenly bodies. John Neal is the author of several books, including All Done with Mirrors and The Structure of Metrology. He's now going to give us the second annual John Michell Memorial Talk at Megalithomania, and the title is Michell and Me, How We Cracked Metrology.
What I'm going to talk about is some of the things that John accomplished, particularly his contributions to the study of metrology and my input into his work. I'll attempt to explain why the general study is of great importance. Without knowledge of metrology, beautiful figures of geometry that spring from Islamic tile work, ancient buildings, temples, and human form are simply numerical ratios. It's the application of a measurement scale onto these things that enables one to see the numbers as used by the designers and the architects emerge. This adds another complete dimension to the interpretation that is particularly applicable to archaeology. I met John around 1967 because of my interest in UFOs. He'd recently written a book on the subject, and I was to speak to him about it. By this time, he was busy researching what was to become the volume that kicked this whole movement off, resulting in you sitting there and me sitting here. This was, of course, The View Over Atlantis. It ignited a deep and enduring interest in our past, focusing our interest on Glastonbury and Stonehenge. This is the book, of course. And it was during this period, when we was researching this book, that he told me at length about the content of this coming work. But nothing could have prepared me for the impact that that book had. It wasn't just me, but a whole generation of curious people, in many senses of the word, were lucky enough that were lucky enough to have read it at that particular time, at that magical time. It caught the zeitgeist. It was the inspiration of its age. For the first time, people had a concept-shattering glimpse of John's vision of the high culture that existed in prehistoric times and spread over the whole world. The evidence for its existence was scattered across the globe, preserved in the temples, in the monuments, and the megaliths that were carefully cited, and their interrelationships often took the form of alignments that would have to have been methodically surveyed. The source material that had inspired John to achieve his vision was William Sterling's The Canon and Bleibond's Gematria. These works were broadly based on the science of gematria, which is the weaving of geometrical constructs into the written word through the values of the numbers, because in both Greek and Hebrew, the letters are also the numbers. So each word, phrase, even whole sentences have a numerical value, and the numbers that come out of the scriptures are often of a canonical nature. That is, the repetitive values that occur, 4, 3, 2, 8, 6, 4, 10, 80, 50, 40, etc., can be and were applied to many classes of phenomena in all religions. This is an example of this doesn't come from Bleibond or anything. It's one of John's constructs following the construct of gematria. And it was during, in all religions, Hindu, Greek pantheism, Hebrew, Norse, Celtic, to name some of them, these numbers repeat in their mythologies, in the foundations of their heavenly cities, in their time cycles, the dimensions of the planet and the solar system, and the orderly arrangement of the universe. And another theme that John introduced was that of lays. Of course, we all know about this, proposed by Alfred Watkins in the 20s and 30s. His discoveries are written up as the old straight track, and it was largely these books that were the foundation of the view of Atlantis, which John illustrated then with very good examples of his own confirmation of the evidence that he'd assimilated. This is one of them in particular, and this is where he first makes these tentative probings into metrology. I don't know why, but John, he proposed this unit of measurement called a geomancer's mile, and he wanted to produce evidence for it, and it was 2.72 miles. And he suggested to me that I look on particular maps, Dorset and Somerset, and see how many churches were separated by this thing that he termed a geomancer's mile. Anyway, I found about 100 of them did just exactly that. But I also knew that it didn't matter where you set the compass points, you're going to get the same sort of thing coming out, you know. So anyway, he quoted me in View Over Atlantis as being the founder of the geomancer's mile. I mean, he really set me up for this, you know what I mean? He just needed some bloody evidence, and he got me to provide it for him. Anyway, curiously enough, there are 25 of these to the geographic degree, but we won't go into that. Now, this is the mystery. I mean, I'd only just met John. I hadn't known him for very long. And yet he picked me, of all the people he knew, to quote as an authority on the subject, and I knew absolutely nothing. He must have known somehow that I'll end up majoring in that subject, you know. But I think somehow he apprenticed me at that time, from the very beginning. He immediately followed up with the View of Atlantis was a city of revelation, and this is where he began to refine the subject of metrology and to make solidly grounded figures of geometry conform to the canonical numbers expressed in the ancient units, especially as regards the figure of geometry that are concealed within the gematria of the allegorical stories of the Christian scriptures. The story of Peter and the fishes is patent in this respect.